Please enjoy this ad-free episode as part of our Academic Integrity series sponsored by Pangram Labs, the world's leading AI detection tool. Try it out at pangram.com. That's PANGRAM.com.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience, and we are back on another episode of our Academic Integrity series sponsored by Pangram Labs. And with me is the co-host who is the most, and he is Bradley Emmy, CTO and co-founder at Pangram Labs. Bradley, what's new at Pangram Labs?
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Alvin. It's so great to be here. Pangram is doing great. Honestly, we are just getting back into school for most, for a few schools. I think everyone's kind of like slowly coming back after the summer, and we're actually onboarding quite a few, both kind of in the K-12 and university spaces, onboarding a number of schools onto the state-of-the-art AI detection platform, and we're seeing a really, really good response so far. Like, people are loving it. These, are kind of new schools that are onboarding. It's going really well. So yeah, thanks for asking. How are you, Alvin? How's everything with EdUp?
EdUp is fantastic. It's great, and I'm glad that Pangram's doing well, and that's fantastic. Thanks for letting us know, Bradley. Always happy to have you here with me. So you know how we work. We go right into it. We want to bring our guest in, and he is Dr. Andrew Dunlap. He's assistant professor of anatomy and physiology at Arkansas State University Beebe. Andrew, how you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you guys for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. Just a little bit about myself. You said assistant professor of anatomy and physiology at ASU Beebe. It's easier than saying Arkansas State Beebe, so we'll just say ASU Beebe. 2-year university. We've got 4 campuses, wide variety of associates programs, technical certificates for nursing. We've got a John Deere program. We've got the only veterinary technician program in the state of Arkansas. So a lot going on here at campus. The past year, I've been the head of the committee for academic honesty and integrity to develop a policy for the university, kind of across the board for every division. So it's been an interesting year, and we've kind of got some stuff lined out that we're starting in 2 weeks when school starts. So.
Nice. And I know Bradley's gonna dive deep into that, but before we get to his questions, I just got one more question for you. So, and I love the way you just kind of took charge. That's awesome. I usually ask people, what do you do? How do you do it? You just took charge. I love that,
Yeah.
Andrew. So the question is, and we're asking everyone this, is how do you define academic integrity?
Yeah. So, there's a broad range, especially in the anatomy and physiology world. And I teach face-to-face and then online also. So I'm going to get to synchronous and asynchronous platforms. But, you need to be turned in your work. We don't want to be using unauthorized devices on exams. Grandma doesn't need to take your online exam. So there's a lot of things, we really are for me, my perspective on academic integrity is turning in your work and completing what is yours, what not what someone else tells you. Number 5 was letter C. Put that on the test. So that's kind of my thought process on integrity is turning in your work and your assignments. So.
I love that. Couldn't be more straightforward. Like, just do what is yours and, be honest about that, right?
I'm pretty straightforward, so we'll
great shooter. Go along. All right. Sounds great. We'll get right into it. So, you mentioned kind of before we got on that you are kind of involved in like drafting the policy for your schools in academic integrity and academic honesty, right? So could you just like fill us in a little bit about like kind of like how do you go about like kind of like drafting a policy? Like what does that process look like, and kind of how did you get started?
Yeah, so we started meeting, I think last August, and it didn't take too many meetings. We had on my committee, we had representatives from kind of every division. That way we would have input from different perspectives. Academic integrity from an anatomy and physiology world is completely different than an English paper, right? So we really needed that input from the different divisions to be able to kind of work together and get something cohesive that would be across the board. It only took us 4 or 5 visits to really get something drafted, which was great. We all worked together. And, I think we had our distance ed director on there also, because she kind of handled all the input from other instructors throughout the years as far as, hey, this student's doing this on an online exam, so we need to look at that. So we had everybody taught, face to face and online, so we could get different perspectives there also. So.
Oh, super cool. So like kind of like what was kind of the impetus for like getting the program started? Like, did you guys have an academic integrity policy before, and it just kind of needed major revision, or was it kind of something that just came up from scratch?
Well, we had some stuff, but it wasn't everything like set in stone. I think it was more of a from what I know of it is it was more instructor what they wanted to do, not necessarily here's a set policy. And so and that causes some issues, because if you have one who's very lax and doesn't mind if you do XYZ, and then you have someone that, like in my case, I'm fairly strict on it because most of my students are going to go into healthcare professions, and nursing school doesn't care. So we got to prepare them for that. So we were trying to get something to where everybody's on the same page.
Gotcha. Yeah, makes a ton of sense. So like, I mean, I think like obviously like you mentioned that like, academic integrity looks very different for like an English professor as compared to a math professor, as compared to an anatomy and physiology professor, right? And so like
For
I
sure.
think like you still definitely have to give instructors like kind of like individual freedom to kind of like enforce, kind of the rules and the guidelines that they want to enforce individually, right? But like what
Right.
were kind of some of the standards that you guys came to in terms
So-
of like something that you want everybody to do?
Pretty much what we set up is a kind of almost like a 3-strike policy, to where you got a first, second, and third violation. Because again, even throughout a course, let's say we use ChatGPT or some AI to formulate a discussion post answer, as opposed to was asking Google my test questions and getting answers, right? Those are kind of different weighted points wise and scores. And so we kind of did like a 3 violation deal, to where whenever an instructor feels like there was an infringement on academic integrity, we have an online form that they would fill out and detail what assignment, what student, and that would then go to our distance ed director and each dean of the division to kind of review and see what they thought the violation was. And so at that point, we had the 3 and increasing severity as we get to the third. If you get caught 3 times in one class, that was pretty much dismissal from the class. But we always had those checks also with the deans taking, reviewing to kind of alleviate some of the, maybe that instructor just doesn't like me, so they're going to always kind of protect the faculty a little bit, honestly. And that was kind of my perspective on it, to give us a little bit of backing to, not that he just doesn't like me, comments and stuff like that. So.
Got it. Okay, cool. So it's basically not like a policy that is kind of like telling individual instructors and students like what is an academic integrity
Correct.
violation. It's more just operationalizing kind of the process of like how academic integrity runs.
Right. So we've got in our student handbook, it states that, plagiarism, turning assignments that somebody else did, unauthorized technology, cheating on exams, all that's not acceptable. So that's in the actual student handbook, and then violations of those will come into this policy that we've set. So.
Got it. And you said kind of like so kind of like who are the people that kind of like when an instructor submits like an online form, like, okay, my student used ChatGPT to like, write their essay for them and turn it in and present it as their own, like kind of like who receives that, and like kind of like what happens next, like kind of like after kind of the report's received.
Right. So, instructor would initially just, kind of give that student the 0. Like, so we'll just do my class because it'll be easier than me speaking for anybody else. But, student cheats on an exam, I give them a 0. I fill the form out that we've created. That goes off to our distance ed director, who then will, and I'll say, okay, they were using Google to ask for test answers. Okay, well, she'll go review that. They would then go review that section of the test and give me kind of a yay or an nay that they were. But at the same time, it's going to each individual division's dean, who also will be able to review and be able to, say yes or no. If it's a kind of a toss-up type deal. Like, well, maybe they weren't, or let's say an essay pinged 60% on Turnitin or something, or whatever they're running the essay through. Could we prove that? Well, that's where, we kind of have those outside eyes looking at it. I think as sometimes faculty, we can kind of get on, they're cheating, and they may not be. So we we send it to the division deans because if this same student's name keeps popping up, well, maybe we need to look at another online course that they're in, or, the kind of have some data, math and science here. We need the data to kind of track and see, what the students are doing. So at one point throughout those violations, that the dean of students would get involved too, especially if it gets to a infraction to where they may, get a 0 F in the course or be, that type of deal. So.
Right, makes sense. So like kind of like the dean kind of like acts as kind of both like a little bit of an investigative unit, but more as kind of just like a information kind of like, okay, like let's kind of take a second look at this, let's interpret this, let's make sure that things are fair, right?
For sure, we're trying to have that non-biased approach for the review side of it.
Yeah, and then do you have like kind of an adjudication procedure too? Like, is there like kind of like a hearing or like kind of like a panel or anything?
The students have a right to appeal their scores. And one thing that we put, so the student, the instructor in the policy has to notify the student also. We want to encourage discussions and interactions with the student, especially on that first violation. Like, hey, I know you did this. You're going to get this score 0 or whatever. Let's not do it again. Okay. And kind of really work and teach with these students because we don't know what background they came from prior to getting here. So we want to make sure that we're, just really trying to get them to be better and to do better and to learn. And we don't want, our goal is not to get them out of class. We want them to succeed. And so each violation is the instructor has to actually send an email to the student also saying, hey, here's what I saw. And have a meeting really to talk with them and kind of coach them on how to be better. So
yeah, for sure. I like how you mentioned too that like often like kind of these cases are kind of hard to prove, especially with AI coming into the picture. You mentioned that like instructor might submit a report, turn it in, says like 60%. It's kind of like, well, like this is a little bit of a toss up, right? Like it's not like evidently clear that there was an academic integrity violation or there was not, right? And we know this all too well because like we work on AI detection technology, and like the technology is obviously getting better, but it's never going to be 100%. And so like it's kind of like circumstantial at best. And so like kind of like how do you guys kind of navigate that part of the process where it's kind of like, okay, like I have like some evidence, but I don't feel like that it's like super, super conclusive.
Yeah, and that's hopefully that's where this would definitely probably be outside of my anatomy and physiology world because the heart's the heart. We're not going to get around the anatomy of the heart. So it's more kind of into like, Englishes and history and some of these paper writing classes. But that's where we're hoping that the deans, that outside perspective, the distance ed, and then it really comes down back to that kind of conversation with the instructor and the student. If it's a first offense, maybe they let them rewrite it. Because we do have that flexibility. We're not trying to take any autonomy away from the instructors and the faculty, but we do still need a policy, right? So if they may give them the option to say, hey, redo this, and we'll, after the conversation, redo it, turn it in, and then we'll see, and they know the students should know not to use an AI to write their paper, but who knows? So that's kind of what those checks with the deans and that conversation with the student lead to. Now, if it's a third violation, that's a different story, and this is per class, so it's not campus wide. So this would be 3 violations per course. So
that makes a lot of sense. Like I think like it makes sense to like given the benefit of the doubt, like to put a lot of weight on like basically like how that conversation goes.
For sure.
The instructor and the student, because I mean I think like a lot of people that have come on the show have said that like like students are generally like, pretty honest. Like students
They
like
are.
generally like, if you just kind of point out to them like, hey, like, I think you made a mistake and like, let's learn from this. Like generally like students are pretty receptive to that. It's only kind of like maybe like 10% or less of students that really kind of like
Correct.
try and push back on that. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
I would completely agree. And also I'll note too that within the policy, if a violation is so egregious that like I feel like it needs to go straight to the third violation, the faculty does have an option to where the division dean can go, yeah, that's completely way out of line. We're not, we're going to go in straight to the third violation. We're not going to give you a second chance. That would be a rare instance, but those policies are there. And then also we have some programs that are state and nationally accredited. So our vet tech program, our nursing, we have EMS, EMT programs. So all those kind of fall under a different level of integrity there, right? So, we let them in the policy. They can use our policy, but, if you're cheating on an exam in an EMT school or nursing school, that's, not okay. So they're kind of a one strike out a lot of times. And that we let them do that because they are governed by, different bodies. So.
Right. It's like a different level of seriousness.
Correct.
And like the stakes are higher. Yeah. It's
Correct.
like no longer a learning moment. It's like a fairness moment. Like, it's
correct.
Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I have to be fair to all of the other students that, have worked hard to produce this score on this.
Well, and, at some point those students might have your health in their hands, and, we want to make sure that they did pass that test. Right. So, I mean,
yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned like, anatomy, physiology, like, yeah, I love that you said you're like kind of math and data guy. Like I'm a math and data guy too. So
sure.
Maybe that'll kind of segue into my next question, which is like, okay, so like, as kind of like, overseeing academic integrity, right? Like I'm sure that you must see that like, some departments, some classes, some professors like must have like kind of like a lot more cheating, a lot more academic integrity violations than others. So like kind of like how do you see kind of like the university's role in like providing those instructors like support or like kind of advice for like kind of like how to be a little bit more like proactive and preventative?
Yeah. So
like integrity.
Along with our policy, we worked with some other universities in state and kind of got some ideas on what their kind of policy on like AI usage was. And so we kind of combined, like kind of just made our own. So we gave them 3 kind of options, and this is going to be in everybody's syllabus. So even in my course, if I had a paper on, some disease or something like that, I could use this. So we have a prohibiting use, an instructor selects the use, and then encouraging use. So, prohibiting, that's pretty self-explanatory, 0 usage of AI. Instructor, this would be where the instructor could say, okay, this assignment, I want you to go use whatever AI source you want to use. Okay. And then encouraging use is kind of just use it. Personally for me, I'm in that kind of selecting use, encouraging use. I'm not anti-AI because it's here. I think our job at this point in time is to really encourage ethical use of AI. I mean, I use ChatGPT and Gemini to like, hey, I've got this food. What am I going to make for supper? Or like, what should I buy my wife for our anniversary? Like, predictive tech, that's AI. Like, if we really want to get down to it, Turnitin is AI grading, checking for AI. Like, so we kind of have to just, I think, be more teaching the students how to ethically use it in certain situations and not, not using it all the time. But I don't think we can be completely just a hard-nosed no on stuff like this because it is here. And it makes our lives easier, some of the stuff. So.
Oh yeah, and especially in like the health sciences, like like people that go on to like med school and like nursing school, these people have to like just straight up memorize like so much, a huge volume of information and just random facts. And so it's okay, I shouldn't say like random facts, important.
No,
facts.
It's a lot. So I'm a chiropractor also. So when I was in chiropractic school, like we had for our national board exams, it's a bunch of some of the stuff's random. Like you just may never even hear of it ever again, but you have to know that stuff. And I think I know there's some programs now that can listen to lectures and then generate, note cards off of that lecture. And I think that's just a great tool for students to be able to study and to learn, because there's a lot of information, especially in the anatomy and physiology world.
Oh, for sure. Like, I would be surprised if like most students these days are like writing their own flashcards. I remember like people used to do that. People like to spend like hours just like writing flashcards. And now it's just like, well, AI can just make the flashcards for you. So, you can spend all of your time just like drilling and not all this time like making flashcards.
Right. Yeah. And some students, thrive off of kind of that writing and coloring, but they know that's how they study best, and that they would do that instead of using the students that know I can just read the flashcards and learn it. That's where the AI would definitely come into to play.
Yeah. So how do you kind of communicate with your anatomy students on like, okay, like this is how I want you to use AI, and this is like how I don't want you to use AI? Like, what's the kind of like language you use with them?
Yeah, I have a lot of my students that use Quizlet. They'll go in, not necessarily AI, but someone will make them and they'll go use those. And a lot of times I'm like, look, if I don't explain this how it clicks in your brain, type it into an AI and see if it explains it better, or go look, Google it and go see if this video has what clicks in your brain. I definitely understand that I'm not everyone's kind of the perfect instructors. And we use a lot of like programs that will have the beating heart, and you can adjust heart rate and see the EKG with that. And there are programs now you can take a picture of an EKG and put it in, and it'll analyze it for you. I think that's perfect because it breaks it down into kind of pieces to where it's not just one scary thing. I got to know everything on that one page. It just, kind of breaks up the segments to where it's easier to learn.
Yeah, for sure. I think that makes sense. Like, how do you teach your students though to like look out for like hallucinations? Like they ask O3 or whatever to explain something to them anatomically, and like the thing that the AI says is just like actually not correct.
Yeah.
Like how do you teach them to like kind of be wary about that?
I
Like,
always reference the textbooks first. I'm like, let's utilize our textbook, and I get a lot of random questions in especially anatomy when we're doing, physiology and anatomy. I get a lot of random things, and some things I've never heard of that they saw on, TikTok or Instagram or something. I'm like, I'll have to go look it up. But I always, try to stress, like, let's not believe everything we see on the internet. I actually have an assignment. I taught nutrition online, and I have an assignment that's, we don't want to believe what's on social media. Let's go find some published research articles to back up what you saw on social media, or we always want to question what we read on the internet, basically.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's kind
unless
of
it's a reputable site. So
yeah, and that's kind of the same as it's always been. Like I think I think validating the source of information is always
that's the biggest thing is try to and I mean I've seen multiple not flaws, but incorrect data on from using AI to kind of find things, and I'm like, well, that's not correct, and so always. And if I notice that I say that like on an assignment that's been turned in, I will definitely reach out to that student and be like, look, I do know what you did here. It's not right. So if you are going to do that, at least make sure you're going to get it past me and not, get it wrong either way. So
yeah, for sure. And yeah, I mean, I think that makes a ton of sense. And yeah, I also think like, like with these like large language models too, like, like they do hallucinate still, like, and they're like getting better and better at like not hallucinating.
Right.
But I feel like if a student like kind of like watches a lecture video or like reads a textbook and like they're confused by it, I feel like there's more potential in like getting the LLM the full context of what they're reading and being like, hey, can you rephrase this in a way that's easier for me? Or like if they're like a non-native English speaker, being like, hey, can you translate this into Chinese so I can understand it better?
Absolutely.
Because when the LLM is grounded, like when it has like something to look at, and it's just like kind of rewording things, like it's going to be much better at like not making stuff up.
Correct. I would agree with that. Again, I'm math and science, so I mean, I use things to edit my emails and make it sound like I know what I want to say, but it's not really, it always comes out in the email that way. So I have to like make sure it rereads it and kind of rearranges sometimes some stuff. So, putting periods and commas aren't always my best strong point.
Yeah. You mentioned you use AI in your daily work. Like, what's kind of the thing about AI that's like surprised you the most about like interacting with ChatGPT and such?
Man, it's the intuitive learning almost. It's like if I catch something wrong, I'll be like, "Are you sure it's not this?" And it'll be like, "Oh wait, now that I kind of looked somewhere else, oh that is right. You what you said is correct, and I'll correct that." So that's pretty cool. I use it a lot for just more personal use than anything. Again, like hey, what's this movie about? Or if I just a random question about something, I'll just type it in real quick. But I I don't. I've actually just kind of messing around with it. I've had it create test questions that I didn't use, but just to see what the accuracy of it was, and it's quite impressive how you can generate an exam fairly quickly.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I mean, there's so many like AI tools out there, like for teachers now. It's like, okay, like here's a textbook, like make a worksheet for me. Here's a textbook, make a lecture video for me, like all of this stuff. And yeah, I think that it's a lot of promise, but I think also there's like a lot of value in like, the human touch to the instruction.
I agree.
And, like, making sure like, because I think like humans are the subject matter experts and also the pedagogical experts too.
Right.
And so like, as much as like AI is great for, I think like maybe reworking content, like I think like there's definitely like it's definitely not yet to the point where it's like better than a human standing in front of you,
I agree.
like delivering the material authentically.
Yeah, it's like a thesaurus kind of. I guess if I was going, it's like I don't want to use this word, and then I use AI, and it rephrases it into this word for me. It's kind of how I utilize it the most. But like I said, I teach online anatomy, and so face to face we have labs. So we're picking up bone models, and we're looking at we're dissecting hearts. So that was one of the when I was building this past year. Also, I made master course shells for Anatomy 1 and Anatomy 2 for our online. So I was, kind of doing both. But we actually have specimens that the AP2 students get and actually do dissections at home because you can't replace. You can look at it all day long on the computer screen, but until you're dissecting a sheep heart or a fetal pig, you can't see what the heart really looks like. It's different. And so we're trying to keep that human aspect as much as we can to because you learn better, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel like that's like the task that like AI is like the furthest from solving right now, being able to like simulate like a pig heart dissection or something like that.
Yeah. I mean,
like
you're just clicking, it's not. And there's some great programs. We're actually using one in this master shell. It's a phenomenal program. But I'm still a big fan of actually having the specimen, and we're going to keep those labs in there as long as we can to have the dissections because it's a hands-on event. They're learning to cut and going to separate, and you can't replace those with just clicking your mouse around. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned like too with the online courses, like I know a lot of like in a lot of schools, like it's a little bit harder to enforce academic integrity, and maintain academic integrity in the online setting. Just because like there's kind of less of that like kind of personal relationship. So like how do you guys kind of like tackle that and like kind of like make sure that like even in the online setting, you still like maintain this culture of academic integrity and honesty?
Yeah, we not everyone does. We encourage like an instructional video, like an introduction video to where I see my face. It's different than just logging in and not seeing who's actually your instructor. And being in a smaller town like Beebe, we're not a huge town, so a lot of these students will see me at Walmart or see me at the grocery store or the gas station or the restaurant. So they're like, oh, I know that guy. So I think that actually limits them wanting to commit any kind of academic dishonesty. But the other thing that's a really, kind of the challenging part, in my opinion, is some of those interactions where we're doing the discussion posts or some of these other assignments is we really got to tailor the question to not be able to really be an AI generated answer. If that makes sense. You almost have to make it more personal as much as you can. And so I try to do that in my course as much as I can. There's sometimes I can't, and it's just, you just got to deal with it. Sometimes you're gonna get an AI answer, and sometimes you won't. But that's kind of how, just kind of tailor it to where it's maybe more of a more personal experience. And then exam wise, we have exam proctoring online. They record the screen and watch it. I'll watch every student's videos. Read the transcripts, check on chats that may have been popped in by the proctor. So those are all ways that we're trying our best to kind of curb the dishonesty.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, that personal relationship definitely makes it a lot easier.
Yep.
I am in the opposite of a place with personal, small town energy. I'm in New York City, so
we're Beebe's, I think maybe 8,000 to 10,000 people. So now online we have students from all around the area, and even we get on campus students from kind of all around the state come here. But as far as Beebe, the town, we're fairly small. So
yeah, for sure. And I mean, small towns definitely have their all the drama and all the things associated, of course. But I mean, I do think everyone knowing each other definitely promotes more pro-social behavior.
It does,
which is great. I feel like in New York City, every day I see something out here that's just that just shocks me. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this person.
Yeah, we don't get too much of that. Yeah. And that's one thing I like about the face-to-face is I really get to know my students. And so students that are starting on the 18th, they will pretty much stay with me until May, because they'll go from AP1 to AP2. And, I had one student a few years ago. He's like, I think I've seen you more than my parents over the past 9 months. Because, I see them 6 hours a week, 3 hours of lecture or 4 hours of lab, so 10 hours. So, they're with me a lot, and you get to really know those students. And online, it takes a lot more effort to really kind of to get to know them.
Yeah. Fantastic.
All right. So awesome conversation, Andrew. This is great. I love it. Great questions as always, Bradley. Andrew, last question for you. What do you see as the future of academic integrity?
I think it's going to have to keep being evolved. I don't see how there's ever going to be one policy to rule them all kind of deal. It'd be cool if there was, but there's not. As AI tools increase, the policies are going to have to increase. I think, these students, the ones that are wanting to kind of commit academic integrity issues, they're always finding a way, almost they may be a step ahead of us at this point. Who knows? But I think it's going to have to just continually be monitored and evolved. I don't see us really ever getting to a point to where it's, kind of plateaued and here's what it is, and it's not going to get any different. So I think we have to really just kind of keep evaluating yearly as we progress. This this worked, this didn't work, maybe we should evaluate. This is a new thing they're doing, here's the new tool. So I think that's kind of the future is, but the most important part is we really got to just have those conversations with the students and really sit down with them and make it more of a learning experience than it is a negative. That first offense, and that's why we really approached the three strike rule, was to just have those conversations and really help those students succeed in their academic career by, just teaching them and saying, hey, here's what college is now. Here's, what the real world's going to be when you get out. And so that's the most important part, I think, is really sitting down with the students and having those conversations to where we can encourage academic integrity and really just kind of teach them, kind of how it should be. So.
Yeah, totally agree. It's kind of in this world that's going to be increasingly affected by AI.
Yeah.
It's almost ironic in a sense that the human touch is going to be the most important thing moving forward.
Yeah.
The role of the educator and that personal relationship is
Absolutely.
more important because of the presence of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. We really got to keep that human aspect to education, because it could fade very quickly.
Yeah, 100%. Amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Andrew. This is fantastic. Let me first outro. My co-host, who you should know by now, is the most Bradley ME, CTO and co-founder at Pangram Labs. Thank you as always, Bradley.
Oh, these are always so much fun. Thanks so much for having me, Alvin.
Absolutely. And your guest today, ladies and gentlemen, he is Dr. Andrew Dunlap. He's assistant professor of anatomy and physiology at Arkansas State University Beebe, ASU Beebe. Thank you so much, Andrew.
I appreciate y'all. It was a great time.
Absolutely. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.
Thank you for listening. This episode is part of our academic integrity series sponsored by Pangram Labs, the world's leading AI detection technology. Try it out at pangram.com. That's PANGRAM.com.